What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. And this year is the 35th anniversary. I know it's a weird year, but I really wanted to review this film, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's currently available on Disney Plus, and guess what? It has audio description. Wayne Szalinski is one of those names that when I hear it, I know exactly what film it's from. And if it was a Jeopardy question and they were like, name the movie, and they just give me one character and it's Wayne Szalinski, I'm gonna be like, boop boop, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Done. And I don't know why. I don't know why that name is like permanently ingrained in my head. Dr. Alan Grant, boop, Jurassic Park. Like there's just certain names where you're just like, yeah, I do associate that name with that movie. Um, and they're not like the obvious ones like Luke Skywalker or Indiana Jones. Um, but yeah, I saw this movie a lot as a kid. I was 6 when this came out, so it was like 8 aimed at my age, and it was great. It opens with like an animated title sequence and everything, and it feels like welcome kids. The kids are the stars instead of the parents, and yeah, I've had some great nostalgic moments with this. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids also was a huge hit for 1989, making $132 million in 1989, which is pretty solid for a 1989 movie. Um, and really just sort of started a franchise. Now, the franchise itself, not great. I mean, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid is sort of like a campy, I don't want to say a camp classic, but it's got some campiness in there. And then Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves, which was a straight to video movie, kind of brought back the adults sort of and did that. And then there was like a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids TV series, didn't have anybody in it. So the first movie was great. We've also got Jared Rushkin, who is one of the 4 kids who kind of he did some other things in and around this time. I think he was in Big, um, and a few other things. So he had a couple moments as a child actor. I have no idea what that dude is doing now, but he has a couple big roles in and around this time period that have solidified and stood the test of time in films that people are still watching. And I'm like, who's that kid? You know, I've seen him in a couple things. Was he popular? He's sort of for a minute. Um, Adult cast: Rick Moranis is Wayne Szalinski, the nerdy scientist who is inventing things and trying to impress his boss with something. He's working on something, and his son is also nerdy and invents things, and he doesn't pay enough attention to his son. And his son has got like this remote control lawnmower, and so that he can sort of Tom Sawyer his way out of cutting the grass. He convinces somebody else to actually give him something to let them cut the grass in a very Tom Sawyer way, because it's a remote controlled lawnmower, which just seems cool. And so he's a good little schemer. And there's the older sister who's got a date coming up for like a dance. We don't know much about her other than that. She kind of ends up having to take care of her family. There's references to the fact that the mom is like out of the house. Like she can't take this madness. Not necessarily that there's like marital drama, but it's just that dad is in inventing mode. And I guess that drives her insane. So she's outside of the house currently, staying with grandmother. And I'm like, that's really progressive for a 1989 kids film. Where's mom? She's staying with grandma. Oh, so there's trouble in the marriage in 1989 kids films. What are we doing here? What kind of themes do we have going on? Um, the other family that lives next door is played by Matt Frewer, who popped up in several things and around this time period, and also Christine Sutherland, who some people will recognize depending on if they were a fan of a certain TV show about vampires. It's probably her biggest role. Sadly, for somebody who, who works their entire career and trains and everything, I mean, most people don't get one big role like that, so good for her. And she also has this movie, so yeah, so that's the other family, and they have two sons. One son is the older son who's been cut from the football team recently, and it's very sad and upset. And the other son is just kind of like, I don't know, like kind of I don't know how to describe him. I honestly don't know how to describe Jared Rushkin's character in this, and I don't know why his dad doesn't like him. Like, but you get like a distinct feeling that he just like he wants to go fishing with the older son and not the younger son, but you don't really know why, because it's not like the younger son is, I don't know, like he's not doing anything like that. His dad is like, ugh, not that kid. Like, I don't know. He just seems to prefer one son over the other, or he's more concerned about one and their well-being. But when the parents aren't looking, basically there's a situation where all four kids kind of end up in front of this machine after Jared Rushkin's character has knocked a baseball into it, which has basically fixed it, because Wayne hasn't been able. All you need to do is throw a baseball at it and it works. And then they end up in front of it and it zaps them and they get shrunk along with the couch. And they are the size of insects, if not smaller, actually, because like they ride on the back of an ant, so they are really small. This film is directed by Joe Johnston, who would go on to direct films like The Rocketeer, The Page Master, Jumanji, Jurassic Park 3. He's got some really sort of cool films, and this very much used practical effects. There are a lot of practical effects here, sets that were actually built, things that were actually built. They had to build these blades of grass for them to walk through. Obviously, not all of it. They didn't actually fly on the back of a bumblebee, but it's interesting. The stuff that is here, it's really interesting to see it. It's sort of like, I don't know how to describe this. Practical effects just look cooler. They look better when you see them. They look more real. There's something about computer effects, like you can tell that things are computer generated. It's like, oh yeah, we built that. There was craft in this, like, and sometimes the computer effects, they look really cool, and you're like, this is awesome and great for the animators. But there's something really cool about going, wow, how did they build that? How did they do that? They actually built this, and to look at this and to watch them like walking through these blades of grass, you're like, they actually built this. They built giant Legos, There's a scene, and I was actually kind of surprised by it, because I've always heard, and I haven't watched all of Disney's content, but there's a scene in this film where cigarette smoking is actually integral to the plot of the story. And I was wondering how they were going to handle it. And they use the word cigarette once. Basically, the rest of the film, they avoid it and they find a way of calling it something else or just ignoring it altogether. So the dad, not Wayne, Matt Frewer, has a scene where he smokes and then flicks his cigarette across the lawn, and it lands sort of near the kids, and it gives them the ability to have torches. You know what I'm saying? So they can light these torches. So when he flicks it, they say cigarette, so that people know what it is. So it's not just like he's standing outside, he lights a thing in his mouth on fire and then throws it on the other side. What thing might that be? I don't know. Um, and then it lands on the other side, and then it's referred to as like trash, like waste or something like that. It's referred to as the waste or the trash, and I was like, okay, so we're gonna use that word once. I hope everybody picked up on. I hope you can put two and two together. Another scene that's totally missed is, and I remember this only because I've seen the movie like I don't know, a billion times, but he takes later on Matt Frewer when they're trying to figure out and they're like, oh my god, we know where the kids are. Let's well, I reverse the machine so we can size them up, and he's like, no. You're not gonna try that on my kids first, Wayne Zelinsky, with your craziness. You're gonna try it on me. And he gets all manly. And he stands out there and he volunteers. But first, for some reason, he decides to, like, he can't go with anything. So he, like, takes off his hat. And, like, I think underneath it or something, he has, like, somewhere in his thing, when he takes that out, he has, like, a discarded like an almost empty pack of cigarettes, and he's like, well, how did that get in there? Now that line is still there, but it's not referenced what he's talking to. Like the audio description just skips over. He's like, well, how did that get in there? And you're like, how did what get in where? If you've never seen the film before, you'd be like, I don't know. How did that get in there? What is it? And where is it? I don't know. Thank you. So yeah, because it wasn't really integral to the plot. It was just sort of like an aside, like I know I'm supposed to quit smoking. I'm sorry. You know, to his wife, like, I don't know. I promise I would stop. I'm sorry. You know, like one of those things. Um, so I mentioned it once. I actually used the word cigarette, which is, it's in the film a lot more. And if you were sighted, you would see it a lot more. It was in 1989. And I think you could like still just walk into a restaurant and start smoking in 1989. So this was like less of a thing. It was less of a concern. The fact that they're even introducing the fact there's a guy who's trying to quit smoking in 1989 is actually kind of progressive for its time. But anyway, now that we're making audio description that sounds way more recent, by the way, this sounds like within the last 10 years, audio description easily. So they're trying to make, now we have, the ratings board includes smoking as part of the rating. Well, they're not going to go back and re-rate this. So I think Disney's probably thinking, like, how do we get around this? Well, we don't talk about him actually smoking. We just acknowledge that he's throwing a cigarette. And if you make that conclusion that he is a smoker, that's on you. You know, like if we talk around it, then that's all you, bro. You know, the presence of something does not necessarily mean that that's what that is, I guess, is the thought process. Although I don't think that because we have audio description that they need to re-rate the film with the MPAA for accessibility for blind people. I think people just, the concept that we really need to drive home here is audio description is an accessibility function for blind people. And if you create tracks that are different, that send people in two different directions, which Disney likes to do from time to time, what you're doing is you're creating segregation. I like to use that word because as soon as you say that word, everybody goes, what? Because it has such like a historically awful connotation to it. But it's true. When sighted people walk in and they get to see a film and they go, oh yeah, well, this is my experience. And then blind people walk in and they listen to the audio description track and they're like, what the fuck is going on? What? I don't know. What's everybody laughing at? I don't know. And they like have to like turn to their family and friends and like, what's going on? Well, the audio description track didn't tell me that. Why isn't the audio description telling me any of this stuff? You know, it's like I'm having a completely different experience than the people that I'm with. And again, I think people just keep making assumptions. And I say this in so many reviews, that we watch movies by ourselves, and we don't always watch movies by ourselves and TV shows. I mean, yes, some stuff I do, but not all of it. I do watch stuff with other people, and so do other blind people. They have spouses, they have kids. We don't all live on a blind island somewhere. We're not a reality show. Blind Island coming this fall to CBS. Only one will survive and win $1 million. Um, no, but for real, like, that is what it's like. So, do I think that this audio description really bridges the gap? Do I think it's Deluxe's fault that it doesn't bridge the gap? Not really. I think, judging from the choices that are made and the stuff when they do go out of their way to describe it, like the burnt toast and the eggs that he gets served and he doesn't want to eat it because his sister can't cook food. And then they put it down in front of the dog, and the dog doesn't want to eat it either. He backs away from it. He's like, I don't know. So, yeah. There are moments in this film where they capture stuff perfectly. And it is hard to describe. This is one of those things that I always get into about, like, how do you describe what a practical effect looks and feels like, and why most people prefer practical effects versus computer effects in many cases, especially in the early days when computer effects did not look great. There was so many instances early on in this period when they started experimenting with computer animation, where it was just like, oh my god, oh my, or like a green screen type stuff, and we hadn't fully mastered the art yet. So practical effects masters got a lot of work because they had to come in and actually make things and go, how do we do this? And that's what makes this film look fantastic. I don't know that it really matters to a blind person, except a blind person who's really trying to get into cinema, who's thinking about that, somebody who wants to become a filmmaker. That's where we have to really get into it, is what's the benefit of doing a practical effect versus hiring computer animators, and why would you choose one or the other in that situation? But this movie is still fun. I still love it. I miss Rick Moranis like hell. I wish he hadn't quit acting. I remember when somebody punched Rick Moranis in the face, like, just like in New York. He was just like walking down the street and some dude just punched him in the face. I was like, who the fuck is punching Rick Moranis in the face? Fuck that guy. I'd literally lock that guy away in jail for life. Like, it's not even like a thing. I know, like, there's no crime that we can convict him for. I would just put him in a jail. I'd be like, no. Rick Moranis is a national treasure, sir. We need to encourage him to act. You should have walked up to him and given him a hug and said, thank you, sir. I need more of you in my life. Please come back. I really I don't know. He had kind of a really awful film in the mid-90s, Big Bully, with Tom Arnold. And I think maybe that was like the last time that I saw him. I don't know if that's accurate, but it feels like it is. And maybe he was like, God, this movie's so terrible. I just don't want to act anymore. I can't believe I did this film. Either way, Rick Moranis is, yeah, he's just a fantastic person and actor, and I love his work, and he's amazing here. And I can't think of how many films we've missed starring Rick Moranis that we could have had if he had kept going. Because I'm sure his career wouldn't have just been a whole bunch of big bullies after that. I feel like people respect and use him, and I feel like a director like Wes Anderson would have picked him up and been like, oh my God, can you please be in my stuff? I feel like he would have been in like Royal Tenenbaums somewhere, I don't know where, but somewhere. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. There was a Honey, I Shrunk the Audience that was at Epcot. It replaced for a while Captain EO. It was there for a long time, actually. Replaced Captain EO. And that was fun. I remember enjoying that. And then the Captain EO crowd was like, can we please have our back, please? something kind of Captain EO made a comeback despite the Michael Jackson stuff. So what was funny is then I got to refresh my mind as to what Captain EO was, because I think I saw Captain EO when I was too young. I didn't remember it. And then I ended up spending most of my time, every time I went to Epcot, it was always Honey, I Shrunk the Audience. And then finally, Captain EO made a comeback, and I was like, "Oh, let's go see what this thing is that everybody's been talking about for so long that I can barely remember." Um, and that was fun. There was a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids set that was at Disney MGM, which is now called Hollywood Studios, and it showed you how they did it, with the giant Lego pieces and the grass and everything like that. So that was cool too. Anyway, I feel like I've had like a lot of experiences with this film, and that's why 35th anniversary is definitely a weird year. But I'm going through and I'm trying to figure out what films have audio description that are celebrating an anniversary of some kind that make remote sense for me to celebrate and talk about their audio description this year. I want to talk about the audio description mainly because does this film close the gap? And how did they deal with the cigarette smoke? And they sort of dealt with it, and the answer is mostly. So, again, I notice this more with Disney films, that I feel more trepidatious about that closing the gap thing I do on Disney films than I do on anything else. It's like they're afraid to say certain things that are on screen in the audio description. And it's like, we're not fragile. If a sighted audience is allowed to see it, we should be allowed to hear it. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is impossible for me to grade because of the nostalgia. This happens a lot. Would I call it a desert island film? Probably. I wouldn't call the other ones, though. I just need the first one. I just want the first one to go with me. The desert island. I still remember what the poster looks like. They were playing the opening sequence in this with the animation. I could remember what it looked like. Like, there's so many shots in this film. And that's the great thing about what audio description does for me, having been on both sides. Not everybody is congenitally blind. Some people lose vision at random points throughout their life. So wherever you lost your vision, I've talked to people who had it for like through their teens, into their 20s. I lost mine at 34. So like various ages. And if it can memory recall anything for you, I think that's great. And it did that for me. Like, there's some things here that I was like, oh yeah, oh my God, yeah, that scene. And he's like hanging out over the grass and he's got the little microscope trying to find his kids. And I remember what that looked like. And I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you for this trip down memory lane. So the nostalgia factor of it really made me realize this is a desert island film for me. So I'm going to give Honey, I Shrunk the Kids an A+. I do think this is a comfort film for me. I felt really great while watching it, and afterwards it just cheered me up. So thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I will see you guys on the other side.